Do Nothing: How I Learned to Step Back and Lead Better. You may or may not be a business owner right now, but everything you do at home, in the family, in your local community, and at work sets an example for others to follow. You can't help becoming a leader. So I want to tell you about the time I was completely drowning as a small business owner. I was micromanaging everyone, jumping in to fix every problem, answering emails at 11 o'clock at night, and basically being the world's biggest bottleneck. My team seemed stressed. I was definitely stressed, and despite working longer hours than everyone else, projects were still falling behind. The worst part? I thought I was doing exactly what a good leader should do, being involved in everything and working harder than everyone else. Then a mentor recommended this book with the counterintuitive title, Do Nothing, by J. Keith Monaghan. At first I rolled my eyes. Do nothing when I already had too much to do, but I was desperate enough to give it a shot, and it completely transformed my approach to leadership. Today, I want to share how this book taught me that sometimes the best way to lead is to step back and, well, do nothing. So what's Do Nothing all about? Despite the provocative title, Monaghan isn't actually suggesting leaders should literally do nothing. What he's advocating for is a fundamental shift in how we think about leadership. The core argument is pretty radical. Great leaders should focus almost exclusively on setting up the right conditions for their team to succeed and then get out the way. He calls this facilitative leadership, where your job isn't to do the work yourself, but to facilitate your team doing their best work. Monaghan explains that most leaders, especially new ones, fall into what he calls the self-reliance trap. We're promoted because we're good at doing things, so we keep doing things instead of transitioning to actual leadership. We end up micromanaging, overworking, and ultimately stunting our team's growth and performance. The book outlines several key principles for becoming a facilitative leader. First is what Monaghan calls the leadership law. Think of the percentage of work you're currently doing and cut it in half, then cut it in half again. That's probably closer to what you should be doing. Another crucial concept is recognizing the difference between managing processes versus outcomes. Micromanagers focus on controlling how work gets done, while effective leaders focus on setting clear expectations about outcomes and letting their teams figure out how. Monaghan also emphasizes the importance of trust. He argues that most leaders dramatically underestimate their team's capabilities because they never fully trust them with responsibility. He suggests using trust tests, deliberately giving your team members more autonomy than you're comfortable with to see what they can really do. One idea that really stuck with me was Monaghan's take on delegation. He says we should delegate not just routine tasks, but also the interesting, challenging work we enjoy, often precisely the work we're most reluctant to give up. The book also covers how to handle the emotional aspects of stepping back, managing your ego, dealing with the anxiety of giving up control, and finding your value as a leader beyond just being the hardest worker on the problem solver. When I first read Do Nothing, I had this uncomfortable realization that I was doing way too much of my team's work and not enough actual leading. I was still behaving like an individual contributor with direct reports rather than a true leader. I saw how my constant involvement was creating multiple problems. By jumping in to solve issues, I was signaling to my team that I didn't trust them to handle challenges or anything else. By being available 24/7, I was creating an unhealthy work culture. And by keeping my hands in everything, I was becoming a bottleneck for decisions. I also recognized that my motives weren't entirely pure. Yes, I genuinely wanted to help my team, but I also liked being the hero. I enjoyed swooping in at the last minute with solutions and having people depend on me. Being needed felt good, even though it wasn't what my team actually needed from me. The most confronting part was realizing how much of my self-worth was tied to doing rather than leading. If I wasn't the hardest working person on the team, who was I? If I wasn't personally producing tangible outputs every day, was I really contributing? I had to face the fact that my micromanagement wasn't just hurting my team's growth, it was also hurting our results. By trying to control too many details, I was missing the big picture, strategic work that only I could do as the leader. And instead of getting the benefit of diverse perspectives, I was creating a team that just tried to guess what I would do. After reading Do Nothing, I decided to completely reimagine my role as a leader. Here's what I actually implemented. First, I did what Monaghan calls a task audit. I wrote down everything I was doing and made 3 lists. Things only I could do, things I was doing that others could do, and things I was doing that others should do. The last list was painfully long. Then I started delegating systematically. I identified team members who could take on more responsibility and had actual conversations about their career goals and how more challenging work aligned with their development. I created a decision rights document that clearly outlined which decisions team members could make on their own, which needed consultation and which needed approval. This simple tool immediately reduced the number of questions coming my way and empowered my team to move faster. I also set clear boundaries around my availability. I stopped checking my email after 7 o'clock and on weekends. I blocked off time for strategic thinking, and I started being explicit about when I was unavailable, helping the team get comfortable working without me as a constant presence. The hardest change was learning to sit with the discomfort of not knowing every detail of every project. When team members came with problems, I had to fight my instinct to jump in with solutions. Instead, I started asking, what do you think we should do? And what support do you need from me? The results were pretty transformative. Within a few months, my team was making better decisions because they weren't just trying to guess what I would do. They were actually thinking for themselves. People started developing new skills and stepping up in ways I hadn't anticipated. And several team members told me they felt more motivated and engaged because they had real ownership. As for me, I found that by doing less, I actually accomplished more. I had time to think strategically, build relationships across the organization, and focus on longer-term goals. And surprisingly, I felt more fulfilled in my role because I was finally doing the job I was actually hired to do, leading rather than doing. Have a think about these. As you think about your own leadership approach, here are some questions to consider. What percentage of your time is spent doing work that someone in your team could do instead? What's stopping you from delegating this work? When was the last time you deliberately stepped back and let your team handle a challenge without your direct involvement? How did it turn out? What's one task or responsibility you hold on to because you enjoy it, even though delegating it would help develop someone in your team? How would you rate the level of trust in your team? Do team members feel trusted to make decisions and take risks? How do you know? What would happen if you were unavailable for a week? Would your team know how to proceed, or would work grind to a halt waiting for you to come back? What could you accomplish if you freed up 30% of your time from hands-on work? What strategic priorities or big picture thinking might you finally have time for? Remember, the goal isn't literally to do nothing. It's to focus your time and your energy on the unique value you bring as a leader, while creating space for your team to grow and excel. Sometimes the best way to lead is to step back and trust the talented people you've hired to do what they do best. Good luck out there. Cheers.